Wyoming Territory, 1868. The Sweetwater Valley stretched beneath a sky so vast it seemed to swallow the mountains whole. Cattle lowed in the distance as 25-year-old Cooper Lawson guided his horse along the fence line of the struggling Crooked Arrow Ranch, his jaw set tight against the wind. 3 years returned from war, and still the nightmares haunted him. The memories of comrades falling beside him at Gettysburg, at Antietam. He had survived when better men had not, and that knowledge weighed on him like iron shackles. No use dwelling, Cooper muttered to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Thunder. The animal's ears flicked back at his voice. Ain't nobody coming to save this ranch but me. The Crooked Arrow had been his father's dream, but tuberculosis had claimed the old man last winter, leaving Cooper with 500 acres, 60 head of cattle, and debts that multiplied like prairie dogs. The neighboring ranches had already begun circling, waiting for him to fail so they could snap up the land for pennies on the dollar. Cooper had learned one truth in the war and reinforced it in the wild country of Wyoming. A man survived by relying on himself alone. Attachment was weakness. Love was a luxury afforded to those who hadn't seen what he had seen, who didn't carry what he carried. The frontier demanded solitude, demanded strength. No woman should share the burden he bore. No woman could. As the sun dipped toward the jagged peaks of the Wind River Range, Cooper spotted a plume of dust rising along the east road. Squinting against the glare, he made out the outline of a wagon approaching at a steady clip. Visitors were rare enough to be suspicious in these parts. Thunder sensed his tension and danced sideways. "Easy," Cooper said, reaching for the Winchester rifle in his saddle scabbard. He rode to intercept the wagon, keeping his hand near the rifle as the distance closed between them. The driver pulled back on the reins as Cooper approached, bringing the wagon to a halt. Cooper's breath caught in his throat. A young woman sat on the bench seat, her honey-blonde hair escaping from beneath a practical bonnet, her blue calico dress dusty from the road. Her clear green eyes met his without wavering. "Katherine Kendrick," she announced, her voice steady despite the strain evident in the tightness around her eyes. "I believe you were expecting me." Cooper's brow furrowed. "Ma'am, I wasn't expecting anyone." She reached into a leather satchel beside her and produced an envelope. "I answered your advertisement in the Denver Post for a housekeeper position." She held out the paper. "I have your response here." Cooper took the letter and immediately recognized his father's handwriting. The letter was dated 3 months prior, just before his father's health had taken its final decline. "Miss Kendrick, he cleared his throat. "My father passed away this winter. He must have placed that advertisement before he died." Color drained from her face. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 21 or 22, with a delicate dusting of freckles across her nose that the prairie sun had intensified. "I see. I have traveled from Denver on the understanding that I had secured employment. I'm sorry for your trouble, but I have no need for a housekeeper." Cooper handed the letter back, noticing the tremble in her fingers as she took it. "Mr. Lawson, I have spent nearly everything I had to get here," she said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. "I cannot simply turn around and go back." Cooper shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. The woman was not his problem. He had enough troubles keeping the ranch afloat without adding another mouth to feed. "There's a town called Sweetwater about 15 miles west," he said. "They might have work for you there." She straightened her spine. "I will pay for lodging tonight. One night. Then I shall seek employment elsewhere." The sun was sinking fast, painting the sky in violent streaks of crimson. 15 miles to town would put her on the road well after dark, when wolves and worse things prowled. Cooper cursed silently. His father had raised him better than to send a woman alone into the wilderness at dusk. "You can stay the night," he conceded grudgingly. "But come morning, you'll need to move on." The relief in her eyes was palpable, though she tried to hide it. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." As Cooper led her wagon toward the ranch house, a distant howl echoed across the valley. He glanced back at the woman, at the proud set of her shoulders despite her obvious exhaustion, and felt something shift inside him, a complication he neither wanted nor needed. The ranch house was a sturdy 2-story structure of pine logs, with a wide porch facing the mountains. Inside, it bore the unmistakable signs of a home without a woman's touch. Unwashed dishes stacked in the kitchen, clothes draped over chairs, dust thick on the mantelpiece. Katherine surveyed the room with barely concealed dismay. "You live like this?" I live to work, Cooper replied tersely. The house keeps the rain off. Her gaze lingered on a daguerreotype on the mantel. Cooper's father standing proud beside his mother, who had died when Cooper was just 14. Your parents? Cooper nodded curtly. Spare rooms upstairs, first door on the right. Pumps out back if you want to wash. He busied himself with starting a fire in the cook stove, acutely aware of her presence as she moved around the kitchen, gathering the scattered dishes into neat stacks. You don't need to do that, he said. If I am to stay the night, I prefer not to live in squalor, she replied primly. Over a simple supper of salt pork and beans, Katherine spoke little of herself, though Cooper gleaned that she had been working as a schoolteacher in Denver until the school board had discovered she had no husband and declared her unsuitable for influencing young minds. They believed an unmarried woman past 20 would corrupt the children with her spinsterhood, she said with a bitter edge to her voice. 22 is hardly spinsterhood, Cooper observed. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. In Denver society, it might as well be. My options were limited. Marriage to men I found repellent or domestic service. She met his eyes. I chose service, thinking it might afford me some independence. Cooper found himself wondering what had driven her to such desperate measures, what shadows she carried behind those clear green eyes. But he didn't ask. Asking meant caring, and caring was a luxury he couldn't afford. That night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving in the room above his, Cooper felt the walls he'd built around himself shift slightly. The ranch was too quiet most nights, filled with ghosts of the past. Having another living soul under the roof made the silence less oppressive, even as it discomfited him. It's just for one night, he told himself firmly. Tomorrow she'd be gone, and his orderly, solitary existence would resume. But in the morning, Cooper discovered the kitchen transformed, clean, organized, with the smell of coffee and frying bacon greeting him. Katherine stood at the stove, her hair neatly braided, wearing a simple gray dress. I hope you don't mind, she said, sliding a plate of food in front of him. I thought I might earn my keep for the night. The bacon was perfectly crisp, the eggs cooked just as he liked them. Cooper couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for him. It's good, he admitted grudgingly. As he was finishing, a thunderous pounding at the door startled them both. Cooper rose, hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Frank Harrington stood on the porch, his bulk filling the doorframe. The owner of the neighboring Box H ranch had been trying to buy the Crooked Arrow since before Cooper's father died. Lawson, Harrington growled. Your cattle broke through the fence line again. 3 of them are grazing on my south pasture. I'll get them back today, Cooper said evenly. Harrington's eyes slid past him to Katherine, who had appeared in the doorway behind Cooper. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. Well now, what have we here? Didn't know you had company, Lawson. Miss Kendrick is just passing through, Cooper said coldly. Is she now? Harrington removed his hat with exaggerated politeness. Ma'am, if you're looking for employment, the Box H is always in need of pretty faces. Katherine's expression remained neutral. Thank you, but I have other arrangements in mind. After Harrington left, Cooper turned to her. You need to be careful around men like that. I have encountered men like that before, she said simply. I survived them then. I shall survive them now. Something in her tone made Cooper look at her more closely. There was steel beneath her genteel exterior, a resilience born of hardship. For the first time, he wondered what had really driven her from Denver. I'll hitch your wagon, he said after a moment. Town's due west. Follow the main road, you can't miss it. Katherine nodded, gathering her few possessions. When she emerged from the house, Cooper was surprised to see her hesitate. Mr. Lawson, before I go. She took a deep breath. I couldn't help but notice your ranch is in need of considerable attention. Your fence lines are failing, your cattle are undernourished, and this house. She gestured at the building behind them. It requires a woman's touch. Cooper stiffened. I manage fine. Do you? Her green eyes were disconcertingly direct. Because from what I can see, you're one bad season away from losing everything. His jaw tightened. What's your point, Miss Kendrick? I propose a business arrangement. I will stay on as housekeeper through the summer. In exchange for room and board plus a modest wage, I will cook, clean, mend, and help with whatever tasks need doing. She lifted her chin. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Lawson. And I learn quickly. This ain't no place for a woman alone. I am alone regardless of where I go, she countered. At least here, I would have purpose. Cooper studied her, this woman who had appeared from nowhere with her precise speech and hidden depths. Every instinct told him to send her away. Another person meant another vulnerability, another complication in a life he'd deliberately kept simple. Yet the ranch was slipping through his fingers. He couldn't manage it alone, a truth he'd been avoiding for months. And there was something about Katherine Kendrick that suggested she would work twice as hard as any ranch hand he might hire. Until summer's end, he said finally. Not a day longer. Relief flooded her face, though she quickly masked it. Agreed. I shall endeavor to earn my keep, Mr. Lawson. Cooper, he corrected her. If you're staying, might as well use my name. Katherine, she replied with the ghost of a smile. They'll most call me Kate. Neither could have known that with those simple words, their lives had irreversibly changed course, like a river finding a new path through unyielding stone. In the weeks that followed, Cooper watched with grudging admiration as Katherine transformed the crooked arrow. The house first, scrubbed and polished until it shone, curtains washed and mended, his father's old furniture arranged to make the large rooms feel welcoming rather than empty. She planted a small kitchen garden and took over the chicken coop, increasing egg production within days. But Katherine didn't stop there. Cooper returned from mending fences one evening to find her poring over his father's ledgers, a crease between her brows. You're losing money on feed, she announced without preamble. The supplier in Sweetwater charges 20% more than the one in Laramie. Cooper frowned. Laramie's 3 days ride. Yes, but with what you'd save, you could hire a dedicated supply wagon once a month and still come out ahead. She showed him the figures she'd calculated. Your father was paying the Laramie rates. Someone changed the arrangement after he died. The neat columns of numbers didn't lie. Cooper had been so focused on the physical work of the ranch that he'd neglected the business side, and someone had taken advantage. Where did you learn bookkeeping? He asked. A shadow crossed her face. My father was a banker in St. Louis. Before she trailed off. He insisted I understand finances, even though it wasn't considered proper for young ladies. Cooper sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't press. They all had pasts they'd rather not discuss. Instead, he found himself riding to Sweetwater the next day to confront the mercantile owner about the price gouging, returning with supplies at a fair price and newfound respect for Katherine's business acumen. As May yielded to June, Cooper discovered that Katherine was as capable outside as she was in the house. She learned to drive the wagon with skill, took over care of the kitchen garden and chickens entirely, and even helped with the calving when one of the heifers had trouble. Where did a schoolteacher learn to birth calves? Cooper asked afterward, watching her wash blood from her arms at the pump. Katherine smiled enigmatically. I grew up on a farm before we moved to the city, and I observed carefully. Indeed she did. Cooper often felt her eyes on him when he demonstrated a task, taking in every detail, asking precise questions. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned despite the bonnet she wore faithfully. The genteel city woman was adapting to frontier life with remarkable determination. Yet for all their growing ease working together, Cooper maintained his emotional distance. Each night, he retreated to his room after supper, leaving Katherine to her reading or mending by the fire. He told himself it was to maintain propriety, but the truth was more complicated. The woman disturbed his carefully constructed solitude, made him remember things he'd rather forget, like how to hope, how to laugh. One hot July afternoon, Cooper returned from the north pasture to find Katherine missing. The bread she'd been baking sat cooling on the kitchen table, but the house was silent. Katherine, he called, a thread of worry tightening in his chest. When no answer came, he checked the barn, the chicken coop, the garden. Finally, he spotted fresh tracks leading toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. Following them, he heard splashing before he rounded the bend. Katherine was in the creek, her skirts hiked indecently high, revealing slim calves and bare feet as she waded in the shallow water. Her hair hung loose down her back, golden in the sunlight, and she was laughing, a sound so rare that Cooper stopped in his tracks. She wasn't alone. A young deer, barely more than a fawn, was drinking downstream, watching her with wary curiosity. Cooper must have made a sound, because Katherine turned suddenly. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, something dangerous and unacknowledged. Then the deer bolted, breaking the spell. I apologize, she said quickly, lowering her skirts. The heat was unbearable, and I thought, no need to explain. Cooper cut her off, his voice rougher than intended. It's your time to use as you please. That night, Cooper couldn't sleep. The image of Katherine in the creek haunted him, her unguarded smile, the graceful line of her neck, the way sunlight had caught in her hair. She wasn't just his housekeeper anymore. She was a woman, vibrant and alive, bringing light into corners of the ranch that had been dark for too long. And that terrified him. The next morning, Cooper announced he was riding to Sweetwater for supplies. I'll be back by nightfall, he told Katherine, avoiding her eyes. In town, he lingered at the saloon longer than necessary, nursing a whiskey and rebuffing the advances of the painted women who worked there. He needed distance, perspective. Katherine Kendrick was temporary. Come fall, she would leave, as they had agreed. Getting attached would only lead to pain. It was nearly dusk when Cooper finally headed back to the ranch, his horse's hooves kicking up dust on the lonely road. The setting sun cast long shadows across the prairie, and he found himself pushing the animal faster than usual, an inexplicable urgency driving him homeward. As the Crooked Arrow came into view, Cooper saw smoke, too much smoke, and not from the chimney. His heart lurched into his throat as he spurred his horse into a gallop. The barn was engulfed in flames, orange tongues licking at the darkening sky. And there was Katherine, running from the house with buckets of water, her skirts tied up around her knees, her face streaked with soot. "Katherine!" Cooper shouted, leaping from his horse. She whirled, relief flooding her face. "The horses, I got them out, but the hay." Cooper grabbed a bucket and joined her at the pump. Together they fought the fire, but it was clear the barn was lost. All they could do was prevent it from spreading to the house or nearby trees. Hours later, exhausted and filthy, they sat on the porch steps watching the last embers glow in the ruins of the barn. Katherine's hands were raw from the pump handle, and a burn marked her forearm where a flying spark had caught her. Without thinking, Cooper took her injured arm, examining it in the dim light from the house. "This needs tending," he said softly. "It's nothing," she insisted, but didn't pull away from his touch. Inside, Cooper dug out his father's old medical kit and found a salve for burns. Katherine sat quietly as he applied it to her arm, her eyes following his movements. "I should have been here," he said, breaking the silence. "It wouldn't have mattered. The fire started so quickly." She hesitated. "Cooper, I don't think it was an accident." His hands stilled. "What do you mean?" "I found boot prints behind the barn that weren't yours. And there was a smell, coal oil, I think, before the flames started." Cooper's jaw tightened. "Harrington, you can't be sure." "I can. He's been trying to run me off this land since my father died." Cooper's voice hardened. "He thinks if the ranch fails, I'll have no choice but to sell to him." Katherine's eyes flashed. "Then we must ensure it doesn't fail." Something shifted between them in that moment. A partnership formed in fire and determination. Cooper found himself telling her about his father's dream for the Crooked Arrow, about the years of hard work poured into the land, about his own doubts that he could live up to that legacy. And Katherine listened, really listened, in a way no one had since before the war. When he finally fell silent, she reached out and laid her hand over his. "You are not alone in this fight, Cooper Lawson," she said simply. The touch of her hand sent warmth spreading through him, awakening feelings he'd thought long dead. For the first time in years, Cooper allowed himself to hope for something beyond mere survival. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Frank Harrington rode up to the ranch house with two of his men, surveying the charred remains of the barn with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Shame about your bad luck, Lawson," he drawled. "Fire's a dangerous thing out here." Cooper's hand hovered near his holstered revolver. "Wasn't luck." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Careful with accusations, boy. Could be dangerous for your health." His gaze shifted to Katherine, who stood in the doorway of the house. "And for those you care about." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. "State your business and move on, Harrington," Cooper said coldly. The older rancher smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Just being neighborly. Thought I'd offer to buy you out, seeing as how you're having such difficulties." He named a figure that was less than half what the ranch was worth. "Not interested." "You will be," Harrington predicted, turning his horse. "Summer's almost over, winter's coming. Hard to run cattle without a barn." His eyes lingered on Katherine again. Hard to keep a woman satisfied in such poor conditions, too. After they'd ridden away, Katherine turned to Cooper. "What will you do?" "Rebuild," he said simply. "We start today." The "we" wasn't lost on Katherine. Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Rebuilding the barn became a race against time. Cooper hired 2 experienced ranch hands from town, good men who'd worked for his father before, and together they set to work cutting timber from the property's western ridge. Katherine proved herself invaluable once again, cooking for the hungry men, keeping accounts of expenses, and even helping with the lighter construction tasks. The long summer days blended together in a rhythm of hard work and shared purpose. As August waned, Cooper found the walls he'd built around his heart crumbling despite his efforts to maintain them. He caught himself watching Katherine as she hung laundry on the line, her profile gilded by the afternoon sun. He found excuses to be near her, to hear her voice, to see the smile that was becoming more frequent as the days passed. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Katherine broke their comfortable silence. "Summer's nearly over," she observed quietly. Cooper felt something cold settle in his chest. Their agreement, "Until summer's end," she'd said. "Not a day longer." "The barn will be finished next week," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. Katherine nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "And then I suppose I should honor our arrangement." Cooper wanted to ask her to stay, but the words stuck in his throat. What could he offer her? A hard life on a struggling ranch? The company of a man haunted by war and loss? She deserved better, deserved the life she'd trained for, teaching children in some civilized town, not this endless toil. "You've been invaluable," he said instead, the words inadequate for what he truly felt. "The ranch wouldn't have survived without your help." "Is that all I've been to you, Cooper? Help?" Her voice was so soft he almost missed it. The question hung between them, fraught with unspoken feelings. Cooper looked at her then, really looked at her, at the woman who had walked into his life and slowly, steadily, become essential to it. "No," he admitted finally. "Not just help." Katherine turned to him, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "Then what?" Before Cooper could answer, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. 3 riders appeared in the gathering dusk, moving fast toward the ranch house. Cooper stood, instinctively placing himself between Katherine and the approaching threat. "Get inside," he ordered, "and bring my rifle." Katherine disappeared into the house as Cooper stepped off the porch, hand resting on his revolver. As the riders drew closer, he recognized Sheriff Miller from Sweetwater, accompanied by 2 deputies. "Cooper Lawson?" the sheriff called, reining his horse to a stop. "That's right." The sheriff dismounted, his expression grim. "I'm looking for a woman. Blonde, early 20s. Name of Katherine Kendrick. We have reason to believe she's here." Cooper's blood ran cold. "What's this about, Sheriff?" "Murder," the lawman replied bluntly. "She's wanted for the murder of Edward Blackstone, a prominent banker in Denver." Behind Cooper, the door creaked. Katherine stood there, his rifle in her hands, her face ashen. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice steadier than her pale face would suggest. The sheriff's hand moved to his own weapon. "Put down the rifle, Miss Kendrick." Cooper stepped between them. "There's been a mistake. Katherine wouldn't hurt anyone. Edward Blackstone was found stabbed to death in his office 3 months ago," the sheriff continued. "Miss Kendrick was seen fleeing the scene. She disappeared from Denver that same night." Cooper turned to Katherine, searching her face. "Tell me it isn't true." Her eyes met his, filled with desperation and a terrible resolve. "I killed him," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he was going to," she swallowed hard. "He tried to force himself on me. I had refused his proposals repeatedly, and he said if I wouldn't be his willingly, he would take what he wanted." The rifle trembled in her hands. "I only meant to threaten him, to make him stop." But he laughed and came at me again, and the letter opener was there on the desk. A tear slid down her cheek. "I ran. What else could I do? No one would have believed me over him." Cooper felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The woman he had come to care for, to love, if he was honest with himself, had killed a man. Yet looking into her eyes, he believed her. He knew her character, her strength, her fundamental decency. "Sheriff," Cooper said carefully, "there are circumstances here you don't understand." "That's for a judge to decide," the lawman replied. Step aside, Lawson. Don't make this worse than it already is. Katherine lowered the rifle slowly. Cooper, it's all right. I've been running long enough. No. The word came out harsh and final. Cooper moved to stand beside her. I won't let them take you. You can't stop the law, son, the sheriff warned. Not without making yourself an accessory. Cooper's mind raced. If Katherine was taken back to Denver, she would hang. A woman's claim of self-defense against a respected businessman would carry little weight, especially with no witnesses to corroborate her story. What if there was another way? Cooper asked suddenly. What if the woman you're looking for no longer exists? The sheriff frowned. What are you talking about? Cooper turned to Katherine, taking her free hand in his. Marry me, he said quietly. Right now? Tonight. Her eyes widened in shock. Cooper, a wife cannot be compelled to testify against her husband. Cooper continued, his eyes never leaving hers. And a husband has legal rights to protect his wife. That's not how the law works, the sheriff protested. Maybe not in Denver, Cooper agreed. But out here, a man's home and family are sacred. You'd be taking a married woman from her legal husband, forcing her to stand trial hundreds of miles away for defending her honor before she was married. How do you think that would play with the territorial judge? Uncertainty flickered across the sheriff's face. Frontier justice was different from city law, more immediate, more personal, and heavily influenced by community standards. Even if that mattered, the sheriff argued, you ain't married yet. Then let's remedy that, Cooper said. He looked to Katherine, his heart in his eyes. If you'll have me. Katherine stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or obligation. Cooper, you don't have to do this. You don't have to love me. And there it was, the truth laid bare between them. Cooper felt something long frozen within him crack and thaw. Too late, he whispered, for her ears alone. I already do. The simple declaration transformed her face, hope blooming like wildflowers after rain. Sheriff, Cooper said without breaking Katherine's gaze, I believe you're also a justice of the peace in this county, are you not? The lawman shifted uncomfortably. I am, but then you can perform the ceremony right here. Witnesses and all. Cooper nodded toward the deputies. The sheriff hesitated, clearly torn between his duty and the complicated frontier ethics of the situation. Finally, he sighed heavily. This ain't right, he muttered. But I can't say it's entirely wrong either. He fixed Katherine with a hard stare. Was it self-defense truly? Yes, she answered without hesitation. I swear it on my life. Something in her sincerity must have reached the man. Very well, he conceded. But this marriage better be real, Lawson. If I find out it's just a legal trick, it's real, Cooper assured him. And so, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Cooper Lawson and Katherine Kendrick were married on the porch of the Crooked Arrow Ranch. The ceremony was brief, the witnesses reluctant, but when Cooper kissed his bride, there was nothing false about the emotion that passed between them. After the sheriff and his deputies had ridden away, with warnings that they would be watching and checking, Cooper and Katherine stood alone on the porch, the enormity of what they had done settling around them like evening dew. You saved me, Katherine said softly. Again, Cooper shook his head. We saved each other. He took her hands in his. Katherine, I meant what I said. This isn't just for show. Nor for me, she admitted, a blush coloring her cheeks. I've been falling in love with you since that first day, when you let me stay despite every instinct telling you to send me away. Cooper drew her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. I thought I needed to be alone to survive out here. I was wrong. I needed you. Your strength, your mind, your heart. As autumn painted the Sweetwater Valley in russet and gold, the Crooked Arrow flourished under their combined care. The barn was completed before the first snow, sturdier and larger than the original. New cattle were purchased from a breeder in Cheyenne, promising to strengthen their herd come spring. Frank Harrington made no more trouble after the sheriff paid him a visit, investigating the barn fire. Without proof, nothing could be done, but the scrutiny was enough to make the man back away, at least temporarily. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside the windows of the ranch house, Cooper presented Katherine with a deed, the Crooked Arrow, with both their names inscribed as equal owners. My father always said this land was meant to sustain a family, he told her as she traced their names with wondering fingers. He was right about that, as he was about so many things. Katherine's eyes shimmered with tears. I never thought I would find a home again after I fled Denver. Never thought I would find someone who would know the worst of me and love me still. Cooper gathered her in his arms. We all have pasts, Katherine. It's what we build together that matters. As the fire crackled in the hearth and snow blanketed the valley in pristine white, Cooper reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. He had been so certain that the frontier was no place for love, that attachment was weakness, that he was too damaged by war and loss to deserve happiness. Katherine had proven him wrong on every count. Love hadn't weakened him. It had given him new purpose, new strength. Together, they had turned a failing ranch into a thriving home. Together, they had faced down threats both human and natural. Together, they had forged something enduring from the raw materials of their broken pasts. Spring arrived with the promise of new beginnings. The creek that had once witnessed their unguarded moment now burbled with snowmelt as wildflowers dotted the greening pastures. Calves frolicked beside their mothers, and in the kitchen garden, Katherine planted seeds that would feed them through another year. And in the cradle Cooper had carved with his own hands, their daughter slept peacefully, her tiny fingers curled around her mother's thumb, proof that even in the harshest frontier, love could not only survive but flourish. You were right to make me stay, Katherine said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar gold and crimson. Cooper smiled, reaching for her hand. Best decision I ever made. Even better than marrying me, she teased. That wasn't a decision, Cooper replied, his voice warm with certainty. That was destiny. The crooked arrow would stand for generations to come, a testament to two wounded souls who found healing in each other, who built a home where before there had been only survival, who transformed a harsh frontier with the most powerful force of all, a love that had come too late to be denied.